Hey everyone, I'm DJ Alex Brown. In today's video, I want to explain a couple of company related things. Now, I want to be clear, being a company, or multi-op, or whatever you want to call it, is not right for everybody. So I don't want people to be feeling like they have to be a company. You don't have to be a company. You can absolutely be a single op. It's not a requirement. But if you want to dive more into the company side, running a multi-op, DJ business, or really any business for that matter, it doesn't necessarily have to be a DJ business, there's a couple of things that are going to change. There's going to be some benefits and there's going to be some drawbacks, and that's what I want to talk about because my journey over the past year has basically been going from very much a single op to very much a company in less than a year's time. And that is a whirlwind to do. It's not without its benefits, though. There are certainly downsides, but some of the benefits I want to start with talking about are there have been many occasions this past year that I've said, I would not have been able to execute this event on my own. I would not have been able to do this event on my own. The first one of these things that comes to my mind is a wedding that we did. I DJ'd it, but I also had about 4 other people with me that day to help make this wedding happen because it had an offsite ceremony, it had a lot of equipment, and I said if I did not have employees to help me on this wedding, there's no way that wedding would have happened. It would have been a lot more stressful. It was already very stressful as it was, but it could have been a lot more stressful than that if I did not have employees, if I did not have my company backing me up on that event. And I probably wouldn't have been able to book that event if I didn't have those employees. I would have been scratching my head, not knowing what to say to the customer. But knowing that I had employees, I was able to say, yes, we can book this. This is how it's going to work. I need to add an additional employee, so there's going to be this additional cost. You might not necessarily work in the same way, but that's just one of the benefits of being a company is that you have more capability. One of the other key benefits, that's one of my takeaways from this past year, is that people, when you're a company, they'll start to ask you what you can do and not as much just, oh, this is what you say you do, so do this for me, please. We've had, especially with corporate type events, nonprofit events, we've started to have more of a ask type coming from our website. And what I mean by that is, instead of people reaching out and saying, I'm interested in, let's say, marquee letters, because most of my company stuff is all focused on It's Lit weddings and events. I don't really advertise DJ Alex Brown Entertainment as much as a company. And you'll usually see me wearing a lot of It's Lit swag and in videos, and that's what that is. But people will ask what you can do for them, if you can do things for them. So the first example of this was Bistro Lighting. That was about a year and a half ago that we started doing that. More recently, we've had a lot more audiovisual production type inquiries that have been asking, can you do this? Can you do this type of projection? Can you do this effect we want to do? Whatever the situation is like that. It can be anywhere from we're looking for backdrops and drapery or a custom hedge wall. All of these things that are very customized that I've always wanted to do, and I've always wanted our clients to ask, can you do this? Part of that I would boil down to being a company, and one of the benefits of being a company is it's a little more ambiguous. It's not as focused on an individual person. Because of that, people are a little more like, can you do this, instead of just saying, oh, they only do this. Sound off in the comments if you disagree with that. I mean, that's how it's worked for me. If it's worked differently for you, then, I value everyone's opinion on that, because at the end of the day, my company is still learning and growing. My third benefit here is that over time, and again, this isn't something I necessarily expected, over time, you'll be able to see things in a very different light. And what I mean by that is I started out this year like, I don't know how busy we're going to be. I don't know how well this transition to being a company is going to work, because this was a very new thing for me to really dive headfirst into the deep end of building a multi-op company. For me, I noticed a couple of things over this past year that made my life easier, made me enjoy running my business more. One of those things in particular is I have more choice over what I can do. I get to choose, in most cases, less so with DJing, but generally events, I get to choose what I want to work, what I don't want to work. I get to choose when I want to work more so I can decide if I want to do more of the office side of things or more the event side of things. We've also just had new opportunities and new services, and I enjoy a consistent challenge. I enjoy learning new things. I enjoy building our company, and I like to be able to take this up a step each year. I always like to grow. I always like to expand, perhaps sometimes faster than I probably should. I've learned a lot about managing people. I've learned to sometimes give that control away because an employee might actually be able to give a customer a better experience than I can, while I might have, super expertise. I might get bored if I'm just working a photo booth, and then I'm not going to be as involved there. It's better if I'm either on site to manage in that situation, or if I am completely off site and remote managing and just helping as needed. That can also be a good thing for your personal life, your family relationships as well. So, I never want to discount that. Now, specific to the wedding and events industry, if you're in, DJs, rentals, productions, whatever space you're in, there are some downsides. At least for me personally, I can't speak to anybody else's downsides. I do feel a little bit more anxiety about when the next dollar is coming in the door. There's always, for me, anxiety that an employee may leave and leave me with a gap. If it's a DJ employee, that's going to be the hardest gap to fill. If they're just someone doing, say, rentals, that might be the easier gap to fill. And luckily, I'm at a point where I think a lot of my employees are pretty loyal and wouldn't just up and leave. But that's always a risk. I feel like the phrase, you can only rely on yourself to do something is pretty true in this example. They're in this situation at the end of the day. On that note, I feel that especially how booked out we keep our people, especially during the busiest season of the year. We have a lot of events. We don't have as many backup people as I would like to really feel comfortable there. So there's times where I'll be at a wedding DJing and I need to manage someone who's out working a photo booth, and I should really have somebody else able to do that so that I can just focus on my DJing. There's going to be a lot of learning and growth. If you've never managed anyone before, if you don't have training in managing people, you're going to learn a lot. I can say I have training in managing people. I have experience in that. I have experience in leading people, and I still had to learn a lot about managing people over this past year, because things are definitely not black and white. They're not cut and dry. You'll find that sometimes there's going to be new problems, and not everyone cares as much as you. Not everyone has as much willingness to learn as you, as the owner, and you have to be able to plan for that. Now, some of that you can plan for and control, and sometimes you might just have to fire someone. I've only fired one person this year, at least so far. There's, I'd say, 2 people in my company that are what I'd say are like my first to fire in a recession, I guess, if you will. You'll probably have, if you expand to being a company, or if you are a company, a couple people in your head, depending on the size of your team. My team is about 7 people. Small in comparison to some people that I know and that I work with at times, but it's also large in comparison to a single op. I would always say the benefits are going to far outweigh the downsides. We've been able to book bigger things. I've been able to enjoy my life more, and so many more opportunities have been opened up by this. It started conversations for me with other people about helping them in their companies, and it's also, to me, I look back and I say I went from 1 employee at the start of the year to 7 employees at the end of the year, and still going, still growing, looking to add maybe another employee or two within the next year, depending on how the event load goes. And we're booked and busy. I mean, we have a lot of events booked in 2025. If I pulled up my DJ event planner, if you're a solo op, at this time last year, my head would have been spinning looking at what we have on our calendar. So we're definitely going to be busy next year. There's no question about that. We're still doing a lot of advertising and marketing. But when I talk to people about how I went from 1 employee to 7 employees in a year, a lot of people are very impressed by that. And whether you consider that a downside or a benefit, I don't really like to hype myself up. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I do think it's interesting that the response has changed from people being, oh, you run your own business, cool, yeah, to, oh, you have employees working for you. And people are a lot more impressed by having more employees. Necessarily care about impressing people, but I do find it interesting that when you start to say, well, we've added all these new services and we have employees now, and I deal with insurance and taxes and workers' comp and really more managing the business, that people take that in a different light. I think because a lot of people are solo ops, solopreneurs, single op, whatever you want to call that, and they hear what a company does and they're shocked by it. I don't think it was necessarily as expensive as I expected it to be to hire employees. Granted, I don't spend very much on the actual finding employees part of the process, but I think at the end of the day, that's like buying a new piece of equipment. It's a small investment for hopefully a long-term gain. I didn't expect workers' comp to be as cheap as it is as far as insurance goes. I expected employment taxes and payroll costs to be more. I do use QuickBooks Online payroll. It's just the easiest thing for me. It's not necessarily the cheapest, but that's what I prefer to use. I've chosen to do things the way I like to do things when it comes to managing people. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, I think the managing expectations with employees, managing the way people do things has been more challenging than I expected it to be. I expected to just kind of hand off, and I was kind of basing it on my best employee who's been with me for over a year, and was a contractor before being an employee. I did learn a lot in that process, and I think all of that, doing it in such a short period makes things harder because you have to react very quickly to things. But everything I do is building out a future for the company. So everything, if I make a guide because somebody's going to be doing some sort of work, say running a photo booth, and I make a guide for them, or I tweak something because we found that there's a problem that, they didn't have the information they needed, that's going to return itself forward many times over because you're building the processes to grow. And at the end of the day, when you're running a company, you're really simply managing systems and processes. Basically be a middleman for someone to hire labor, usually, or rent something. When you think about it that way, it all gets a lot easier. I hope you've enjoyed this video. This is certainly a departure from what I've talked about most of the year on my channel, and I really only have time for videos like this in the off season when I don't have as much going on. If this is a video you enjoyed, if you have any follow-up questions on it, if you want to know any more about these kind of topics, please leave me a thumbs up, like the video, subscribe to my channel, and leave me a comment to let me know if there's anything you want me to follow up on, anything you want to see. I want to make more of this kind of content, but now is the time to do it when I have less events going on, because it's when I actually have the time to do it. And I do want to get a little bit more into the YouTube now that I have a little more time to do other things. So everyone, again, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, peace.